About the big picture today, Jen, which is that most of the people who attended these ceremonies today were Democrats. There were some Republican lawmakers. You do have this pushback from the former president and from some of his supporters, and polls show that there are still a number of Republicans who believe that the election was stolen from the former president. Does President Biden feel as though he's done enough to unify the country? And what more does he need to do, given the sharp divides that we still see on display today?
Well, I would say, Kristen, that I don't think calling this the events of today a partisan issue or suggesting that we have reached a partisan point is doing justice to the tens of millions of Republicans, independents, and others out there who don't feel that way. We're talking about some Republicans in Congress, not all, many, far too many, who, in our view, in the president's view, need to take a look at themselves and think about what role they want to play in the history books. When their children and grandchildren look at the history books, do they want to be perpetuating the big lie? Do they want to be walking like silent lemmings behind the former president and who fomented an insurrection? Or do they want to be part of saving our democracy? So the question really should be directed at them, and that's our view.
I'm sorry, but we are so royally screwed if the media in this country cannot figure out how not to both sides every goddamn issue that presents itself. I swear, Democrats could say that the sky is blue, and Republicans can say that actually it's black with zebra stripes, and the media would report that uncertainty over sky color grips Washington. If we can't demonstrate a basic command over facts without letting partisan interests supersede everything, then what is the point of a free press? Here, an NBC reporter asks if Biden's done enough to unify the country given the sharp divides, as if the onus is on Joe Biden to unify a country that Republicans are currently ripping apart by repeating the big lie, by pretending January 6th was a false flag or a tourist visit, by justifying violence as a political tool. If they are doing things that are objectively anti-democratic, why are reporters asking what Joe Biden's doing to fix it? Why do Republicans get a pass and the responsibility falls on Joe Biden to do all of the work? Why is the media not haranguing Ted Cruz and Jim Jordan and Josh Hawley and Matt Gaetz and the rest of the election deniers about why they continue to perpetuate lies that are directly causing divisions in this country? Why is it just assumed that Republicans won't act in good faith, and so because it's a given, they just get a pass? If anyone can explain any of that to me, I'd love to hear it. But instead, the prevailing narrative today is that there should be unity, a narrative that the media is blindly helping Republicans promote. And so instead of confronting the seriousness of what happened on January 6th, which is that an armed mob of people inspired and incited by the President of the United States ransacked the US Capitol in an effort to kill elected officials, including the Republican Vice President Mike Pence, in an effort to force them to anoint the loser of the election the winner. Instead of promoting that message, we're all playing this game where we pretend that the answer here is to hold hands and say that everything is fine, because God forbid we politicize anything. We wouldn't want to make a politician staging a coup to steal the election political or anything, now would we? I think at the core of this issue, we have to confront what the job of the media actually is. Because, in my opinion, the concept of being journalists has been replaced by being stenographers. That they're not allowed to interpret anything, they're only allowed to repeat the things that both sides say, regardless of the veracity of any of their claims. And God forbid they take a stand on those issues, because then they risk exposing themselves as the liberal media. And so instead, they just stay neutral and give both sides the exact same amount of credence, even though one side, knowing how that media operates, is content to exploit that system for their own partisan benefit. Republicans know they can say anything they want, and that, as far as our media is concerned, it'll be just as valid as the other side. The Democrats can rightly call the events of January 6th an insurrection, and Republicans can just blindly say, no, it's not. And right on cue, the New York Times writes articles with headlines like this: January 6th becomes just another wedge in a divided nation. Yep, that's what January 6th is, just a simple wedge issue. Who's right? There's just no way to know. And what's especially ironic about this absurd deference paid to Republicans by the press is that they don't even get rewarded for it. They still get called the fake news. They still get called the liberal media. They've never gotten an ounce of positive reinforcement for the bullshit both sidesism, and yet they are so scared of being branded liberal that they'll still cower to Republicans who use their headlines to validate their claims while simultaneously shitting on them by calling them fake. I mean, dear God, when are these outlets gonna wake up? But even more ironic than that is that what the press is protecting by pretending that an insurrection on the US Capitol is just politics as usual is a fascist movement. And no, I'm not being alarmist, I'm not being hysterical. You had the leader of a political party knowingly, overtly try to steal an election. We literally have audio of Trump telling the Georgia Secretary of State to find 11,780 votes, exactly one more vote than he lost by. That is literal proof that he tried to overturn the election results. That is not what happens in a democracy. That is what happens in a fascist state, period. And think about what the first casualty in a fascist state is: the press. So you have the media falling over itself to constantly give this movement the benefit of the doubt, constantly pretend that this is all just politics as usual, and yet if this movement was actually successful in their goals, that very media would be the first casualty. Is the concept of both sides really that important for the media that it takes priority over their very existence? The honest to God truth is that we are on the precipice of this 245-year-old experiment ending. We are not immune to authoritarianism or fascism. In our own short history as a country, we've already seen that Americans were willing to undermine our democracy almost from the outset, and now we're seeing it happen again. What we can't do is fool ourselves into complacency by thinking that it could never happen here. It can, and if we don't start to see what's happening as an existential threat, if the DOJ isn't willing to bring the harshest punishments to the people who caused this insurrection, if the media doesn't stop pretending that this is just politics as usual, then we will find ourselves in a situation where all we can do is wonder how we let it get this far, where we went wrong, because it'll be too late to actually do anything about it. So I beg of the media, cut the both sides bullshit and have the courage to be able to acknowledge what is right and what is wrong. Because if you don't do it now, when you have the chance, then you might not be able to do it in the future. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.